I was in a protected industry. I was a young lad, of course. I'd been to high school, and I was training to be with Adelaide University, plus a part-time job with Becker's Proprietary Limited, to be an industrial chemist. And I worked in the Beckers who made the Beck's powders in their laboratory. Norma Matron joining up in that sort of business. Anyhow, I finally convinced Mum that I should join up too, which she finally gave approval. Two brothers in one was the Air Force, one was the Army. My sister was with intelligence, no one knew about it. She was working for the Unemployment Relief Bureau. There was no unemployment period during the war anyway, just a front. And as a result, I saw the occupation currency afterwards of the German occupation currency for Australia, would you believe? German, and the flag. You know, I thought it was Japanese would be coming, but the Germans had plans coming here first. The swastika with the Southern Cross, the triangle with the Southern Cross in the bottom right-hand corner. Oh, they were fairly optimistic at the time. I joined the Air Force in 1944, and I joined as aircrew. I did my initial training school at Summers, next to Flinders Naval Depot in Victoria. Then the casualties over Europe, etc., weren't as high as I expected, so I missed out on the course to Canada, so they decided what they'd do with us. And they sent us fruit picking and all things. And we picked pears. And what do you think we got for dinner that night? Bloody pears. I couldn't stand the sight of pears for years. Finally, I was offered it because of my education. They said, well, how about doing an interpreter's course? So I ended up at the Coogee Bay Hotel in Sydney. I did a 12-month crash course in Japanese. I think about 24 of us started, and I think about 6 of us finished. It was just all day, every day, just one subject. Japanese. Half of them went up the wall. We were taught to read the papers and write Japanese as well as speak it. Anyhow, I was occupation force. The war ended, of course. I remember I was in Melbourne at the time. God, that place went mad. And particularly if you're in uniform. Anyhow, they kept me back and locked me up, and I did the translations for all the death certificates of the Sandakan Death March. And there were Dutch there as well, not only Australians, and British. After I finished there, they flew me to Japan, and I flew up in a Lancastrian, which was the first hottest airliner after the war. That was in 1946. Anyhow, I went up 3 times to Japan. When I arrived up there, I was in the Air Force, of course, but I got shifted to Combined Services Detailed Interrogation Shed, which consists of Canadians, Indians, Australians, English, New Zealanders, Army, Navy and Air Force, and we're all interpreters. I was sent to few odd jobs. I went to Hiroshima and interviewed, Japanese work jobs, and half of them have been affected by the atomic bomb. It was shocking. They were ghastly burns and everything. I saw firsthand, straight after the atomic bomb, really what it was like. They were bleeding and this sort of business. They were a shocking sight, some of them. The other thing was general intelligence. I know that we worked for a long time trying to get the Japanese intelligence report on the bombing of Hiroshima. And we finally tracked down the intelligence officers who wrote the report, and we got a 24-page, foolscap-page typewritten report on the effects of the atomic bomb, which the Yags did not have. We sent them a copy. But, in Hiroshima itself, you'd be walking along what was one of their streets with the houses just demolished either side, and you'd see 2 telegraph posts. They'd be bent over, but they'd be bent apart. They wouldn't be bent in the same direction. The blast was in waves. You'd see against walls a white shadow. The wall would be burnt, but if there was somebody standing in front of it, that shielded the burn on the wall. So you had a blackened wall from the burn and a white imprint of a human body. Poor bugger died. He was killed instantly, but that was just from the flash and the heat. In one building, I think it was 5 or 6 stories, one floor was completely wiped out, and the whole thing dropped down like a deck of cards, and they used that building. The destruction was, you'd never wanted to happen here, there was just nothing left. And I wasn't there that long, and then I went up to Okayama to a British Indian division. I was with them for a while, but finally I ended up over the island of Shikoku. And there's only 4 states or prefectures on Shikoku, and one of them was, our headquarters was in Takamatsu, and I was stationed to the British Field Security Section, which was an offshoot of MI5, MI15 I think it was. And I was with them for ages and ages. From there I went to Tokushima Prefecture, and one bloke myself, a sergeant in the Australian Army, he was a Chinaman, and he was AIF. He didn't mess around, he was a dinky-die digger. Anybody called him a slope or a slouch, he'd drop him. And he was only knee-high to a grasshopper. Thus homing. He married a Chinese girl from Singapore from the Bank of China. Anyhow, he and I, the two of us, were the occupation force for a whole state of 2.5 million Japanese. It was unreal. We were spoilt rotten, of course. You know, we had about a 17-room house, 16 servants, a Benz car, GBs, Harley-Davidson motorbike, a healthy out-of-war reparations allowance for liquor and that sort of business for entertaining. We had a bloody ball.
Yeah.
I didn't want to come home. So they said, you're going to go back and finish your aircrew training. We even had the chief of police in jail at one stage. He was corrupt. But we were intelligence, and we had a lot of trouble with the Koreans. The Koreans were smuggling into Japan, smuggling in arms, of course, for the Japanese Communist Party. And they were a real bastard. In those days, to be a member of the occupation force, they had a height limit. The Australian image was the big bronze Anzac. You had to be a certain height before you were allowed to go. Oh, I'm 6'1". Then I came back and went to Point Cook, finished for training at Sale as a navigator, and then posted to 82 Wing, then I went to the Malayan emergency. I'll never forget, they said, you've got to do a jungle survival course. And I said, well, fair enough, that's to be expected. So what they do, they send me out with a bloody army patrol. They were shooting people. There's no way to train me to survive in the jungle. Peculiar people, the services. As I always say, they're not people, they're characters. Came back, and then I was posted to Aircraft Research and Development Unit, RDU. At this stage, I met a lass when I was with the 82 Wing at Amberley. And in 1952, we got married. But in 1951, I popped the question, the approval of the father and mother, and I was going to hop on the aeroplane at Archfield to go back to Labrador. One of the blokes said, hey, you're off to England next week, do you know? I said, what? Oh, that was crazy. So anyhow, I was a flight sergeant at the time. When I got back, I went and saw the CEO, and he said, yeah, that's right, you're off to England next week. Got a yellow fever then? I said, no. He said, well, you best go to Adelaide tomorrow. We'll arrange a civil flight over for you. The only place you get a yellow fever needle in those days, Adelaide. So over I went, and a week later I was gone. I got back 3 days before the wedding. I got back in 52, we were married in October.
What were you doing there?
We were picking up an experimental aeroplane to bring back to the rocket range without climber Mustang, and it was 4 engines, and it was called the Python Lincoln, and it just went up like a rocket. We were flying over France. We said, Lincoln, so-and-so, impossible, a Lincoln cannot fly that fast. We'd fly, but our wings would flap. Right. It was designed to carry a big bomb. I won't go any further because the government of South Australia wasn't allowed to see it, and he was an air marshal. And
you flew it?
Yeah. Well, they only ever produced 3 of them, and I think we wiped one off. We used to fly at 37,000 feet unpressurised because we had to fly at that height to drop this monster. And it was so big, with concrete in it to give it the weight. When it finally went through the sound barrier and hit the earth, it was making a great crater, practically as big as a block.
Like a city block? Where did you do the testing?
On Boomerang, Rocket Road. I have flown in radioactive aeroplanes. You know, I was on alert the first bomb that went off at Maralinga. We were airborne in Canberra, and we were the guide Canberra to bring the RAF crew, who was 3 doctors, flew through the cloud straight after the blast, straight off after it went off. They all died, of course, quite some time after, but they all got radiation sickness, cancer, everything, you know. They deserve the BCs, those blokes. They wanted to find out the bomb, what the temperatures were like inside, the radioactivity meters and that sort of business, but they all became radioactive themselves. We turned away as the bomb went off and went back to pick them up, to guide them in if they were in any trouble. Surely they didn't expect to live for any length of time.
How did your wife feel about you sort of being there at that time and having been in Hiroshima with all the radioactivity as well?
Well, the funny part of it, I'll never put my name down for, as far as Vet Affairs is concerned, on for the nominal role of those who flew through the radioactive cloud. We followed the cloud right across to the east coast of Australia. The cloud disappeared, of course, but we were flying through the air, and we could tell when we were in the radioactive part of the atmosphere, because that was drifting across the east out into the Pacific.
So it came right across the populated areas and drifted out into the sea?
Yeah. You know, you hear of the laser bombs nowadays, that they can drop them through a window, we were dropping bombs and turning away from the target so that we wouldn't be causing any blast. The bombs had TV cameras in the nose. We used to guide them down onto the target. With having a TV transmitter and receiver in our aeroplane, the screen, we could actually see the target and guide the bomb onto the target. That's what they're doing now with laser. But we started that all way back in October '53. We have one daughter, she's in Brisbane, she's at our end, Louise. I do a lot of work for the RSL welfare. I'm a coordinator here. I have a team of people, and I organise this to the hospitals, that sort of business. I also organise the funerals that were done by RSL Service Paradise. You know, we make sure that those are looked after. We have the two sections. One's the pension section, and on the other side, which I've got on my bill, is the welfare, which is visiting hospitals, and making sure that if they're going to die, that everything's all set for them. Their eyes just light up. I had one bloke who's a beaten man vet, and he said he'd like to do the work, and he went with me, and I took him on a tour of the hospitals, and he came back, he said, I can't believe it. He said, we were so welcome, they just open up and talk to us. And I said, well, they know that we're not after anything from them. We're there to help them.